The first half of the 20th century, from 1900 to 1950, was mostly a period of absolute horror, misery, and despair. In the 1900s, communism took hold in the world for the first time in the form of the Soviet Union. In the 1910s, World War I, then known as the War to End All Wars, took the lives of millions of people worldwide. In the 1920s, a massive economic collapse sent shockwaves throughout the world, drowning millions into poverty. In the 1930s, Nazism took hold in the heart of Germany, which led, in the 1940s, to World War II, the most devastating conflict in human history. Needless to say, if you were a person living in 1950 and had to predict what the next 50 years of the century would be like, judging from what had happened thus far, you probably wouldn't be all too optimistic. However, from 1950 to 2000, the world, especially the Western world, was much, much more peaceful. As the invention of nuclear weapons neutered militaristic ambitions across the globe, hot wars had transformed into cold wars, and with such peace, day-to-day life, for many, was much better than it ever had been before. Cultural freedom started to blossom alongside new forms of media, as well as the rise of impressive consumer technologies that completely transformed our lives. The apex of the century, the 1990s, was an especially enthralling time, as the Soviet Union and the wider communist world started to collapse, and along with it the prospect of nuclear annihilation, many seemingly entered a period of unparalleled optimism. And with the new millennium on the way, the average person was no doubt confident that the future was going to be better and brighter than it ever had been before. Of course, we all know how that turned out. In 2001, the World Trade Center in New York City was destroyed in a terrorist attack, shocking the United States and the wider Western world at large into a period of paranoia. It was at this moment that the optimistic flame from the 1990s was now truly extinguished. So began the War on Terror, a campaign in the Middle East to rid the region of radicals in retribution for the attack. What was originally foreseen as a year-long battle wound up being a 20-year disaster. Regimes were toppled, dictators were dethroned, but in their place came new tyrants. And thus the war continued ad infinitum.
There is no doubt that Iraq poses a threat in respect of weapons of mass destruction.
Millions of lives were lost and trillions of dollars were spent. Many would say for naught. Naught except, of course, keeping the well-oiled wheels of the American military-industrial complex ever moving forwards.
We came, we saw, he died.
In 2008 came the collapse of Lehman Brothers, popping a massive mortgage bubble, beginning a recession the likes of which hadn't been seen since the 1920s. Once again, millions would lose their jobs and thousands of businesses would go bankrupt. Anger against banks, governments and corporations started to permeate society at large. The largest representation of such being the Occupy Wall Street protests. The average person took to the streets and demanded justice against their wealthy elites, who had for so long enriched themselves at the sake of everyone else. In the end, no banker was ever punished. On the contrary, the worldwide elite realised that the Western political left were becoming a dangerous existential threat to their status quo rule, and thus had to take action. To distract from matters of economics and class, they created a campaign to push identity politics within left-wing circles, with the aim of slowly transmogrifying the left's priorities away from class and instead onto race, gender, and other non-interchangeable categories. Thus, the seed was planted, and in the 2010s, it would begin to blossom. Thanks to the elite's stranglehold on the media, The Western left, just as planned, slowly started to turn their backs on their values of anti-corporatism and defence of the poor, and instead started to split people up into different categories, and treating them differently as such.
When you're white, you don't know what it's like to be living in a ghetto. You don't know what it's like to be poor.
Thus began the era of massive political polarisation, whereby the left and right, whose differences were previously minuscule at best, were now like completely separate tribes.
The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
The common man was now at war with each other, while the elites achieved more control than ever before.
Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you?
As if matters couldn't get worse, these same elites were also at the same time selling out their own nations to a rising totalitarian regime.
我在北京
Moving the world away from a period of freedom and democracy into one of censorship, control, dictatorship, and decline. And so, here we are in the 2020s, or as I like to call it, the decade of the awakening. Yeah, things are getting so bad now that even the average person is starting to think, there's something wrong about the world we live in. It feels tense in the air. I'm sure you feel it as well. And it's funny, isn't it? The way that people respond to finding out that our governments don't really represent us, corporations aren't really our friends, and celebrities are famous not because of their talents but because of their loyalty, being a puppet. When people are suddenly faced with this realization and they have this grand awakening, there's two sorts of ways that people deal with this realization. And the first type are the people who endlessly research everything. They're overloading themselves with information, they don't trust anyone, and they become paranoid, they don't know who to trust. I don't know, guys, but I've just been thinking, I've been up for the last 48 hours or so, and I was just thinking, what if, just think about this for a minute, what if Joe Biden's actually like a fucking lizard or some shit? I don't fucking know. I'm telling you, there's these DMT entities, and these entities, they're not from this dimension. You've got multiple different dimensions. You got the first dimension, and they got, we don't know, that's like a line, right? Then you got the second dimension, that's like an ant. Then you got the third dimension, that's our dimension. But then you got do DMT, and then ascend to the higher dimensions. And only when you ascend to the higher dimension, only then can you see the truth as we interact with the intergalactic interdimension. It's these entities, these entities, they know the truth. They know the truth of our existence. And without these entities, our feeble minds can't comprehend these fractals, these strange entities. That's all that we know. We have no idea, not a clue about what we are. Anyway, that's just what I've been thinking about lately. Hope you enjoyed. And these people typically end up being very sad, very angry, they're just not very nice people to be around, but they are open-minded. And to these people, I've always recommended on the gaming front that every so often you have to unplug, right? You can't just overload yourself with negativity, you have to at some point relax, otherwise you start to overload yourself and you become crazy. You've got to take it easy at times. And so I've often recommended games like Stardew Valley, right? Games where they're very laid back, there's no real semblance of reality, it just takes you out of the moment for a while, lets your brain do a little bit of maintenance on itself and take it easy. But then there's the other sort of person who's the exact opposite, and this is the sort of person who just completely lives in denial, right? They just like to pretend that nothing's going on as the entire world burns around them, endlessly distracting themselves with consumer product after consumer product, show after show, film after film, movie after movie, song after song, game after game. It's just you people need to wake the fuck up, okay? And there's not that many games out there to do that. There's many games to distract you from reality and relax you, but there's not many games that are going to give you a dose of reality. Except one. Deus Ex. Your appointment to FEMA should be finalised within the week. I've already discussed the matter with the Senator. I take it he was agreeable? He didn't really have a choice. Has he been infected? Oh yes, most certainly. When I mentioned we could put him on the priority list for the Ambrosia vaccine, he was so willing it was almost pathetic. This plague, The rioting is intensifying to the point where we might not be able to contain it. Why contain it? Let it spill over into the schools and churches. Let the bodies pile up in the streets. In the end, they'll beg us to save them. I've received reports of arms attacks on shipments. There's not enough vaccine to go around, and the underclasses are starting to get desperate. Of course they're desperate. They can smell their death, and the sound they'll make rattling their cage will serve as a warning to the rest. I hope you're not underestimating the problem. The others may not go as quietly as you think. Intelligence indicates they're behind the problems in Paris. A bunch of pretentious old men playing at running the world. But the world left them behind long ago. We are the future. We have other problems. UNATCO, formed by executive order after the terrorist attack on the statue. I have someone in place though. I'm more worried about Savage. He's relocated to Vandenberg. Our biochem corpus is far in advance of theirs, as is our electronic sentience. And their ethical inflexibility has allowed us to make progress in areas they refuse to consider. The augmentation project, among other things, but I must admit that I've been somewhat disappointed in the performance of the primary unit. The secondary unit should be online soon. He's currently undergoing preparation and will be operational within 6 months. My people will continue to report on his progress. If necessary, the primary will be terminated. We've had to endure much, you and I, but soon there will be order again. A new age. Aquinas spoke of the mythical city on the hill. Soon that city will be a reality, and we will be crowned its kings, or better than kings, gods. Deus Ex, also known as Deus motherfucking X.
Alex, what are you doing here?
Where do I even begin? Well, let's start with the basics. Deus Ex is an action RPG that takes place in a dystopian 2050s. The world has been plunged into chaos as a disease known as the Grey Death sweeps across the globe and is killing off large chunks of the population. The United Nations has become a supranational entity that rules over the world's nations from afar, leading to a rise in nationalist groups seeking to take back their sovereignty. At the same time, artificial intelligence has wrecked the world's economy, leading to huge amounts of poverty amongst the working classes of society, and a rise in corporate power like no other time in human history. And this is just scratching the surface. You play as JC Denton, an agent for UNATCO, the United Nations anti-terrorist organization that aims to quell the rising levels of resistance against world peace. You will travel across the world, from the United States to Hong Kong, finding out the truth about who really pulls the string in this new world order, and what their aims really are. On the surface, Deus Ex may look like just another mediocre FPS, but if that's what you think, you'd be wrong. Very wrong. Deus Ex is an RPG first and foremost. So if you're going into this thinking you're just going to be 360 no-scoping your way through the game, think again. This is a game where you have to use your brain, not your brawn. Right at the start of the game, you have to pick what difficulty you want to play on. Now I played from start to finish on realistic difficulty, the hardest in the game, and I have to say, yeah, it was challenging, but nowhere near impossible. My recommendation is that for anyone seasoned at all, play on at least hard or higher, as otherwise it will be a cakewalk. But hey, I suppose that's not bad, as it means you don't have to be an FPS pro in order to get in on the story, which is the real deal of this game regardless. After that, you have to pick your skills. Throughout the game you'll be awarded points from accomplishing objectives or discovering optional hidden places. Your skills really are everything, as depending on what you pick will determine how easy the game is in certain situations for you. Right at the start of the game, you get a huge chunk of points, so be sure to spend them wisely. You don't just want to put everything in weapons, you want a diverse skill set so you're prepared for all situations, like being able to open doors easier with lockpicking, etc. I don't care which one of these you pick, but don't pick swimming. Okay, seriously. You swim in this game for a total of about 5 minutes. Swimming is by far the most pointless upgrade ever. Ever. Also, be sure to not forget to spend them, as you'll never be reminded. At least I wasn't. So the game begins, and you're given your first mission. Terrorists have taken over Liberty Island and bombed the Statue of Liberty, and it's your job to fix it. Right at the start, Deus Ex lets you know this isn't a linear game. There's always more than one way to go about doing something. You can, if you want, be a pacifist and kill no one by sneaking your way forwards. Alternatively, you can, as I did, kill everyone in sight.
Stay cool. Hey!
It really is up to you how you go about doing your business, and what weapons, if any, you decide to have in your arsenal. I have to say, I really do not like Deus Ex's guns. There's this absurd mechanic whereby you can't just target the enemy and shoot. No. Instead, you have to lock onto them for like 5 seconds, and only then, do you have a chance at hitting them. If you don't do this, you're shit out of luck and will miss every shot. I mean, personally, I just find this annoying. Another disaster is the sniper rifle. As if you're untrained in its use, you can't hit shit. It's like you have Parkinson's. Oh, fuck. It doesn't give much motivation to upgrade a weapon at all if you can barely use it effectively while untrained to get a taste of what it's capable of. Stuff like this just made me switch to using melee weapons throughout the entire game instead, as at least you can hit with them. My favourite of which being the sword. And yes, I said sword. It's an awesome weapon that just one-shots pretty much everyone. Come here, come on.
I am not allowed to speak to visitors.
I do like certain ranged weapons though, like the flamethrower. Unlike in most games whereby you just set enemies ablaze and they just stand there on fire like nothing is wrong, in Deus Ex, the enemies realistically just start shitting themselves and running around until they burn to death. Oh, fantastic. You also have these things called augmentations, which you can upgrade throughout the game, which are like situational abilities. One augment provides some light for you in dark places, another increases the melee damage you do temporarily, whereas my favourite heals you for a ton of health per second. The augments really make you feel as if you're a nanotechnically enhanced cyborg freak. Deus Ex isn't open world in the sense that there's one massive map and you can go anywhere at any time. Instead, it has a set amount of maps and provides the player the freedom to go anywhere within them. It's not linear in the slightest, having multiple different routes to go and lots of hidden areas to explore, some of which even provide optional story advancement. One reason I like Deus Ex is because the developers clearly took a lot of time to build the world and flesh it out. Everywhere you look, there's some stuff to read that advances the lore, or even just objects you can interact with. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my personal headquarters. Let me give you a tour. Here we have my chocolate bar vending machine. Ah yes, just put it on the floor, very hygienic. Here we have my soda machine, I'll have a lot of them, thank you very much. Here we have my snooker table, I'm a professional at this by the way. Here's my TV where I like to watch some good old-fashioned propaganda. My overpriced sofa made of 100% slaughtered animal skins. I mean, what's not to like? Oh, looks like we have some friends coming over. Welcome! But the thing that makes Deus Ex really memorable is not so much its shooty guns, it's not so much its maps, it's not so much its NPCs, though all of those things are great. The thing that makes Deus Ex so memorable is its story, its setting, and its relevance to today. It is freaky just how much Deus Ex has managed to predict the state of the world today. The funny thing is, Deus Ex is meant to be based in 2050. It's predicted the 2020s, we're 20 years ahead. A disease that's going around spreading like rapid fire that's being used to rapidly take away people's freedoms.
Ladies and gentlemen, this gathering is unfortunately unlawful under the coronavirus regulations we have currently. You are not allowed to meet inside with this many people under law. At this moment in time, you need to go home. Failure to comply with this direction to leave and go to your home address ultimately could lead you to be fined £200, or if you fail to give your details, to you being arrested. I suggest, ladies and gentlemen, though it is Good Friday and I appreciate you would like to worship, that this gathering is unlawful, so please may you leave the building now. Thank you.
A totalitarian police state that gives people curfews and locks people down?
Any of this, right? You will be going to court for criminal damage and everything we have kept within. Let them do it, and I'll tell you now. No, you're supposed to be here to protect us. You're here to protect us. You are here to protect us. Are you standing under your oath? Are you standing up for your oath? His name's not
Where's
Martin.
Martin?
Where's my son? He's isolated.
Step out the way.
No.
Step out
I
the
want
way.
your badge now. I want your badge. Are you? Where's your warrant? Where's your warrant? Hold on.
Martin, you're under arrest for a breach of COVID regulations. You failed to quarantine in a designated hotel when instructed to do so. You do not have to say anything that may harm your defence if you do not mention something which you later rely on court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Do you understand?
Are you standing up?
Governments who sell out to corporations and don't really give a shit about the people they represent?
That's why we only have one message for those who seek to push hate, division, and violence. You have no place on our platforms.
I mean, this is really a game about now, isn't it? Really? Deus Ex is a game all about elites manipulating the world from the shadows. The world is depressing and vile, and the way it mirrors the way our world is today is unreal.
People know the government has a vaccine. Riots everywhere.
Some of you may have noticed that right now, my hair looks fucking ridiculous, doesn't it? I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not as bad as it was back in the Mean Bean Machine days, but it's still pretty bad. I mean, I look like a homeless person. And do you know why that is? It's not because I'm a lazy bastard, it's because I can't get a haircut. It's true, I can! Seriously, look it up. At the time of recording, it is against the law to get a haircut in the UK. Let me repeat myself. It is against the law to get a haircut in my country. Then again, when your Prime Minister looks like this, that shouldn't be too much of a surprise.
You might think that this is some kind of circus trick for which he's been specially trained, but not so. He is doing this entirely on initiative. He's seen others doing it and he's copying. And that ability to imitate, as well as to use tools, is something which started among monkeys but has been brought to a much greater level.
Now, I usually let my girlfriend cut my hair for me as she somehow manages to actually do a good job, but she's currently held up in Sweden. Because in order to merely enter the UK, you have to take 3 tests, and each one costs an average of around £150. And considering flights are getting cancelled left, right and centre, they simply can't get here. So I have 2 choices. I either try to cut it myself and end up looking like Brian Stelter, or I just leave it growing and I end up looking like Howard Stern, right? I can't win no matter what I do. But it just goes to show you just what a fucked up world we live in today. I mean, it makes Deus Ex, which is meant to be a dystopia, look appealing. At least people in Deus Ex can get a fucking haircut. Do you know the saddest part that I took away from playing Deus Ex? It's that this game is like the 2000s sort of idea of a dystopia. I mean, I'd rather live in Deus Ex than this world. I really would. You know, Deus Ex has more freedom and more interesting things going on than now. I tell you, Deus Ex would never be made today. It wouldn't be made today because it wouldn't make sense. People would play it and go, fuck, I wish I was there instead. You know, at least they've got cool augments. You know, it's funny how we in the Western world often like to make fun of countries like China for being one-party states, right? Totalitarian dictatorships, etc. But if you really think about it, I mean, countries like the UK and the United States aren't that much better ourselves. I mean, what are we? 2-party states. Oh wow, that's so much better.
Our governments have limited power by design.
Rhetoric? You believe it? Don't you know where these slogans come from? Well-paid researchers. How do you say it? Think tanks? Funded by big businesses. What is that? A think tank? Privately funded propaganda. The Trilateral Commission in the United States, for instance.
I mean, come on. Every single British Prime Minister in the last 50 years plus has come from one of the same 2 political parties. Same thing in the United States with their presidents. I mean, all you have to do is bribe both of the parties at the same time, and you own the country, no matter who wins. The left parties just have to talk the talk about wealth inequality, and the right just have to talk about defending conservative values. But if at the end of the day, in the back end, the legislation ends up the same, what's really the difference between them? I mean, take the UK for example. The current leader of the Labour Party is a guy called Sir Keir Starmer. Sir Keir Starmer. You're telling me that the leader of the party, who is meant to represent the working class, is a fucking knight of the realm? Meanwhile, if you take a look at the Conservative Party, there's nothing conservative about them. They can serve literally nothing but their own careers. What's really the difference between them? There isn't any, as they're both bought and paid for. Welcome to the United Kingdom, ladies and gentlemen, a free, open and democratic society. Get fucked.
It's called consolidation. Strengthen governments and corporations, weaken individuals. With taxes, this can be done imperceptibly over time.
And before you Europeans start laughing, proportional representation isn't much better either.
They are a group of conspirators who have been seizing governments all over the world.
I don't care what they call themselves. I have seen it since I was a girl, the plotting and scheming of corporations to make Europe into one big country with no separate languages, cultures, or tastes.
It's more than Europe they plan to unify.
Now, I don't think that the developers of Deus Ex were some sort of clairvoyant Nostradamus types, right? I don't think that they were prophets. I mean, the producer behind Deus Ex, a guy called Warren Spector, literally likes to spend his free time tweeting about how bad Donald Trump is. And I'm gonna be honest, that wasn't exactly the sort of enlightened behaviour I was expecting. I'll never understand, for the life of me, how a guy who made a game about puppet governments being ruled from behind the scenes could ever support a man who is, quite literally, not even in control of his own body, never mind his country.
The best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to... Anyway.
I think that the point of Deus Ex was to gather every single conspiracy from like the 90s, put it together and just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. You know, I don't think that they had some sort of overarching grand design. And the thing is, it's worked, right? Because it turns out a lot of theorists back in the 90s actually knew what they were talking about and weren't just complete lunatics.
Come on over here. Come on, coward. No. Come on. You're not an intellectual. You're a fake and a fraud.
Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you'll go into Deus Ex as an NPC and walk out as Alex Jones, okay? I mean, there will always be people out there who believe everything they hear from the corporate-funded media, and let others do the thinking for them.
No revolutionaries? You must not mind martial law.
The only way to maintain order.
Don't you miss using the metro?
A small inconvenience. The city must be kept safe for those of us who are working and trying to pull the country out of this depression.
What if I told you that the depression was caused by a cabal of wealthy businessmen who want to rule the world?
These stories, I hear them every day. Always from someone who wants to blame other people for his bad luck. Yes?
The conspiracy is real.
And I bet you have a little booklet that will tell me all about it, no?
They call themselves Majestic 12.
Good. I was afraid you were going to tell me about the Illuminati.
They were once part of the Illuminati, but they rebelled.
Oh, I see.
Not many people are aware, for example, that one of the UK's largest TV channels, Sky News, is actually owned by the American Comcast Corporation, whose CEO has made many political donations throughout his life. So why does Ofcom, the UK's broadcasting regulator, allow one of the UK's largest channels to be owned and operated by a foreign country who openly has political links, even though all broadcasting is meant to be unbiased? Why do you think? To me, it seems they're all in bed with one another. Deus Ex kind of puts you in the mindset of opening up your mind, getting the cogs moving, you know, starting to think for yourself and go, is this how the world actually works? Because yeah, it is, right? It gets you to stop believing things at face value, because that's what Deus Ex does. It presents you with information after information after information, but it overloads you with information, but you never know who's the reliable narrator. You don't know who's telling the truth. You start to realise that everyone's a fucking lying bastard, you know? Oh shit, someone's at my door, hang on. Now, I will warn you, something you have to understand about Deus Ex is that it came out in like the early 2000s. I mean, this game is almost 2 decades old, so from a technical perspective, it hasn't aged well. Long-time viewers may remember that in the past, I've had issues just trying to play the game. Previous attempts have made the game run at double speed, cutting off some of the NPC's speech. And don't even get me started about the constant notifications telling me my resolution wasn't what it should be, despite the fact the game doesn't bloody support my resolution, making such a notification redundant. Oh, but that's not all. I've also had some lag problems. For example, here I am just playing the game as normal. Then I enter this room with a bunch of water and holy fuck, what is going on with my FPS? Yeah, for some reason, it lags hugely whenever you go near water. But it's not just water, it's certain light sources too. Here I am in this bar and all is well, but then, jeez, this is like a slideshow. The worst part was these underground tunnels. For some reason, the light from the barrels just tanked my FPS. I mean, you have to look down just to be able to play the game properly. It was just a mess and I couldn't figure out why. I think it goes without saying that a game from 2000 shouldn't be making my ray tracing capable graphics card lag in any way. So what's the deal? So I decided to take a look in the options, and if you go into settings and then display, the texture color depth by default is set to 16-bit rather than 32-bit as it should be. So if you set it to 32-bit, all of a sudden, all that lag just goes away. Such a simple fix for a huge problem. Why on earth this isn't the default in 2021, I have no idea. The game is also really dark for some reason. I mean, yes, Deus Ex is meant to be dark, but not this dark. Looking back at these recordings, it seems alright, but when I was playing, it looked like I was playing at midnight the whole time. I mean, I wouldn't say these are game-breaking, but it's not fun to go back and try and play a game from years ago and then you're just bombarded with technical difficulty after technical difficulty. Especially in RPG, it just kind of gets in the way, it takes you out of the experience. So what I would say is, be prepared. This probably won't run as smooth as you think. I mean, if you're willing to play a game from over 20 years ago regardless, you probably have a high tolerance for this sort of stuff. I mean, if you can stomach these animations, you can handle anything. What the fuck is this? The year 2000, ladies and gentlemen. Terrorist commander. Eyes brown, hair none. Well, what the fuck is that on his head then? Dude! Also, the game is extremely archaic in many ways. For example, no autosaving. Like, at all. Seriously. If you don't manually save, you'll lose all your progress. And I, like many people I imagine, learned this the hard way, after losing around 15 minutes worth of progress. Even going from one level to another, it won't save for you. So yeah, be ready. In addition, I'd advise people, if you want to play Deus Ex, do it now. Like, right now. Because I have two theories of my own that I would like to propose to you. The first is I believe that Deus Ex will never get a remake. It'll never get a remake. This game, by today's standards, is far too controversial. It has too much truth. Remember, we live in a world of lies these days. The truth is heavily criticised. And so, this game that actively name-drops people in reality...
Remember that the UN itself was built on land donated by John D. Rockefeller. The wealthy have always been the ones to profit from one world government.
Defaces governments and organisations and corporations.
The whole project of world government, going back to the League of Nations, has been funded and manipulated mainly by wealthy bankers.
Oh no, that's far too dangerous today. Today, this game would be considered a hate crime or some bullshit like that. And that brings me on to number 2. I honestly think that they'll stop selling this game at some point. Call me paranoid, and maybe I am, but I really do believe at some point in time, this game will be removed from Steam, GOG, they'll stop selling it. I really do believe that. It'll be put away in a vault, and the only way that you're going to be able to play it is through pirating or something. Who knows? Time will see. You know, time will prove me right, time will prove me wrong, who knows? But I honestly believe that. I believe that this game is considered dangerous by today's standards. I really do. So if you want to play this, my advice is play it now. Don't wait on it. Go for it. Make no mistake, Deus Ex isn't the best game ever made, no. But it's definitely the most important game ever made. I don't think I've ever seen a game in my life that has accurately predicted so many events back to back, a game that is so relevant. I almost think it should be a mandatory play for anyone in the 2020s. It's just surreal. If you're the sort of person who feels slightly uneasy about the state of the world today, but you're kind of admittedly living in denial about it, this game's for you. In my opinion, this game is a must play for anyone living today. Because this is today.